Hi everyone, where are you tuning in from? And what time is it where you are? It's fascinating to think about all of you listening to this story from different corners of the world, each of you in your own little moment of calm, while I take you back to a time when the skies over Britain were filled not with peace, but with the roar of engines and the sharp crack of gunfire. Imagine the year is 1940, and you are a young pilot in the Royal Air Force, looking out across the green fields of southern England as dawn breaks, the mist curling over the airfield and the smell of petrol and hot oil filling the morning air. The hangars loom large, and the smell of freshly oiled engines blends with the faint aroma of damp earth. The excitement, the fear, the anticipation. It's all there, knotting in your stomach like a restless tide. You glance around at your squadron, fellow pilots fidgeting in their uniforms, checking instruments, polishing propellers, and whispering quietly about last night's dreams of crashing or burning in flames. The air is tense, each one aware that the sky above will soon become a battleground. And yet there is a strange camaraderie, a bond that only those who have faced death together can understand. You strap into your Spitfire, the cockpit snug, the controls familiar but suddenly heavy with the weight of responsibility. Your heart races, and you try to focus on the training, on the drills you've practiced 1,000 times, but your mind keeps wandering to what might happen once you climb into the clouds. Will this be the day you see the enemy up close for the first time? Or the day you don't return? As the engines roar to life, vibrating through the soles of your boots, you feel the sheer power beneath you, the aircraft responding instantly to every tiny movement of your hands. The takeoff feels like lifting into another world, leaving behind the safety of the ground and entering a sky that is both beautiful and terrifying. Clouds swirl overhead, sunlight glinting off the polished wings, creating illusions of angels and demons dancing in the air. You try to steady your breathing, aware of the hundreds of eyes, both human and mechanical, watching the skies, ready to strike at a moment's notice. And yet, even as fear coils inside you, there is a thrill unlike anything you've known. The freedom of flight, the sheer exhilaration of being above the earth, moving with speed and precision, feeling the wind as if it were a living thing brushing against your face, guiding and challenging you simultaneously. You can't help but notice the small details, the slight vibration of the ailerons, the hum of the engines settling into a rhythm, the distant outline of other planes climbing into the sky, their pilots likely sharing the same mix of fear and wonder. Even in the midst of war, there is a strange beauty, a fleeting reminder that life continues to hold moments of awe, even when surrounded by the threat of destruction. As you climb higher, your thoughts drift to those who came before you, the veterans whose experiences echo in every maneuver and every command you follow. You think of the letters you've written but haven't sent, of your family and friends who might never understand the intensity of this life, and yet you know you wouldn't trade it, not for anything. The skies are calling, demanding your attention, your skill, your courage, and as you glance down at the patchwork of green fields and winding rivers, you realize that today, you are not just a pilot. You are part of a story much larger than yourself, a story of endurance, bravery, and the unspoken emotions that bind those who risk everything to defend their home. The morning sun had barely climbed above the horizon, casting long, soft shadows across the sprawling airfield as the squadron gathered near the briefing room. A low brick building that smelled faintly of damp wood and chalk dust from the maps pinned inside. The officers moved with precise motions, unfolding large maps on tables while pointing out areas where enemy aircraft had been spotted the day before. You join them, heart still thudding from the taxi across the field, your gloves slightly damp with sweat, feeling the cold morning air brushing against your face, as if to remind you that this day was different from all others. The airfield hummed with activity. Mechanics running between hangars with fuel cans, the metallic scent of oil mixing with the faint aroma of hot tea from the small mess tent, pilots joking nervously about the previous night's stories of planes vanishing into the clouds, while others adjusted their flight goggles or inspected their harnesses with meticulous care. As the briefing concludes, your squadron leader steps forward, a man whose calm demeanor hides the sharp edge of countless battles in the sky, his eyes scanning each face to gauge readiness. "Remember," he says, voice firm but not unkind, "today is not about glory. It's about survival, precision, and protecting those below. Watch the skies, trust your instincts, and remember your training." You nod, feeling a mixture of relief that the words are encouraging and tension that these same words underscore the stakes. Strapping into your Spitfire feels different from yesterday's practice runs. Today is real. The leather straps dig slightly into your shoulders, and the smell of fresh fuel is stronger, almost intoxicating in its intensity. The engine roars to life, vibrating through the airframe, a familiar rhythm yet charged with anticipation. Taxiing down the runway, your tires crunch against the gravel, and you feel the plane shudder as you increase throttle, each second bringing you closer to the clouds where unseen dangers await. Around you, other pilots perform the same ritual, some murmuring quick prayers, others exchanging quick, sharp smiles or nods, as if to reassure one another that they are not alone in this vast, unpredictable expanse. The first climb into the sky is mesmerizing. Green fields shrink below, cottages appearing like tiny blocks, rivers snaking across the landscape in shimmering lines, and the morning mist lifting in pale curls to reveal the patchwork of the English countryside. You marvel at the beauty, but there is no time for lingering. The moment the horizon tilts with the glint of distant plains, all awe is replaced with razor-sharp attention. Each instrument, each vibration, each shifting cloud could mean life or death, and your eyes scan constantly, searching for the telltale shapes of enemy aircraft. The wind whips past the cockpit, carrying with it the distant scent of fuel and rubber, a constant reminder of the thin line between exhilaration and peril. Flying information, you quickly learn the unspoken language of the squadron. Subtle hand movements, slight tilts of the wings, or brief radio chatter that conveys orders or warnings without breaking concentration. Time seems to stretch and compress simultaneously. The minutes of climbing feel eternal, yet the flash of enemy planes appearing on the horizon feels instantaneous. The first glimpses of the Luftwaffe formations ignite a pulse of fear so sudden it steals your breath for a fraction of a second. But then training and adrenaline take over. You adjust your throttle, tilt your wings, and feel the plane respond almost as if it knows your intent, diving and banking in coordination with your instincts. And with each evasive maneuver, a strange confidence builds alongside the fear. Even amidst the chaos, there are tiny moments of almost poetic clarity. The sunlight reflecting off the polished fuselage of a comrade's plane, the rhythm of engines in harmony as the squadron sweeps across the sky, the distant echo of gunfire that is terrifying yet oddly familiar. Each maneuver is a dance, precise and dangerous, testing not just skill but nerves, judgment, and endurance. As you weave through clouds and sunlight, dodging flak and maintaining formation, the first taste of real combat leaves a lingering echo in your chest, a mixture of fear, exhilaration, and the unshakable awareness that each decision could determine life or death, not just for you, but for those flying alongside you. Landing back at the airfield feels like surfacing from a stormy sea. The earth is solid, grounding, yet your hands still tremble slightly from the intensity of the flight. Mechanics rush forward, checking wings and engines, exchanging brief nods and murmured reassurances that nothing is broken. The smell of hot oil and petrol mingles with the earthy scent of the runway, and the tired yet triumphant laughter of the squadron fills the morning air. For a moment, the fear is replaced by relief and a deep, almost aching awareness of what it means to fly, to survive, and to return again. And yet, as you walk toward the mess tent for a cold, hastily prepared breakfast, your mind can't help but drift to the next flight, the next moment in the sky, and the knowledge that today was only the beginning. The sky had shifted from pale morning gold to a stark, high noon clarity, and as you climbed through a veil of scattered clouds, the distant glint of metal caught your eye. Your heart leapt, chest tightening, as the unmistakable shapes of Luftwaffe Messerschmitts sliced through the blue expanse ahead, their engines droning a haunting, mechanical song that promised danger in every note. The tension that had been simmering throughout the morning now erupted into a tangible electric fear. Your hands gripped the controls tighter, knuckles white beneath your gloves, as the reality of what you were about to face pressed down on you like a weight you couldn't shake. Suddenly, the formation swirled into action. Radios crackled with sharp commands, warnings, and short, clipped exchanges that seemed almost surreal in their calmness, considering the chaos unfolding above the patchwork countryside. You adjusted your throttle and felt the plane respond, lifting, diving, banking with fluid precision, each movement an extension of your own racing heartbeat. The first shots rang out, the distinct staccato of machine guns echoing through the air, mingling with the roar of engines and the sharp whistle of bullets slicing past. A fellow pilot to your left rolled sharply to avoid a burst, and the sight made your stomach lurch as adrenaline surged through every nerve. Fear, strangely intertwined with exhilaration, became your constant companion. Every maneuver demanded split-second decisions. Whether to climb or dive, fire or evade, follow a comrade or take your own path. You glimpsed another Messerschmitt approaching, the silver fuselage gleaming in the sun, and instinctively rolled into a dive, the ground rushing up beneath you in a dizzying blur. The clouds swirled around, a cold wind biting at your face, and for a moment the earth below seemed impossibly far away, a distant patchwork world of fields and rivers, oblivious to the peril above. The gunfire continued, deafening yet oddly rhythmic, punctuated by the occasional distant explosion as bullets found their mark. Amid the chaos, you felt a peculiar sense of focus sharpening your mind. Each maneuver, each turn, each tactical adjustment became instinctive, your thoughts narrowing down to the simplest, clearest objectives. Survive, protect your squadron, and trust your training. A glance to your right revealed a comrade spiraling down, smoke trailing from his engine. A horrifying sight, yet one you couldn't dwell on, not when survival demanded every ounce of attention. You swore silently, pushing the image aside, focusing instead on your own plane, the controls vibrating under your fingers, each adjustment a lifeline against the deadly ballet unfolding above England. Amid the terrifying precision of combat, small, almost absurd details caught your attention. The way sunlight reflected off the rounded wings of your plane, the rhythmic puff of contrails from enemy aircraft, the distant rumble of anti-aircraft guns firing below, their smoke curling into the sky like ghostly fingers reaching toward the heavens. These tiny observations, almost meditative, grounded you in the moment even as danger pressed in from every side. You realized that amidst fear, there was a strange beauty, the way the sky stretched endlessly, the choreography of planes weaving a deadly dance, the camaraderie of pilots silently trusting one another's skill and courage. When the enemy finally broke formation and began to retreat, a collective exhale seemed to ripple through your squadron, though the pounding of your heart betrayed the intensity of the encounter. You circled back toward the airfield, adrenaline still surging, eyes scanning for any lingering threats. Yet the first taste of real combat had left an indelible mark. A mix of awe, terror, relief, and an unshakable awareness of mortality. Landing was both a relief and a triumph, the plane shuddering under your touch as wheels kissed the runway, and you felt the strange, hollow satisfaction that comes from having survived something that could have easily ended in disaster. Walking across the airfield, the smell of burnt fuel and ozone still lingering in your nostrils. Mechanics immediately began checking engines and wings, their quiet efficiency contrasting with the chaos you'd just experienced. Fellow pilots exchanged subdued grins and brief nods, and though words were few, the shared understanding was profound. Today had tested every nerve, every instinct, and yet here you were, alive and ready to fly again if called upon. That night, as the sky darkened into a velvet canopy of stars, you would lie awake, replaying every turn, every near miss, every fleeting glance at the enemy, the adrenaline slowly ebbing to leave a deeper, lingering respect for the immense courage and peril of life in the Battle of Britain. After the adrenaline of the morning patrol and the first encounter with the enemy, the airfield seemed almost calm in contrast, though the undercurrent of tension never fully dissipated. Pilots moved between hangars and tents with a measured, purposeful pace, exchanging quiet words about the flights, minor technical issues, or fleeting glimpses of the enemy formations. The smell of oil and petrol still lingered in the air, mixed now with the comforting aroma of freshly brewed tea from the mess tent, where a small group had gathered to grab a hot drink and a bite of breakfast, the rations simple but welcome. Slices of bread, margarine, and the occasional piece of cold bacon or boiled eggs. Conversation was light at first. Jokes about missed maneuvers or the pilot who had misfired in the clouds. But beneath the humor was a subtle tension, an unspoken acknowledgement of the fragility of life in the skies above. Mechanics busied themselves around the aircraft, hands blackened with grease, wiping sweat from brows as they meticulously checked wings, engines, and ammunition. Every bolt, every spark plug, every panel was scrutinized, for they understood that the slightest fault could mean disaster on the next sortie. Watching them work, you were struck by the precision and dedication required to keep the machines running smoothly. Their quiet efficiency contrasted sharply with the chaos of combat, yet it was equally vital to survival. In corners of the hangar, pilots leaned against walls, unstrapping themselves from harnesses, wiping the sweat from their faces, and exchanging brief nods or murmurs, a small camaraderie born of shared experiences that words could hardly express. Letters from home were another anchor in the whirlwind of wartime life. Some pilots clutched envelopes tightly, reading them over and over, savoring every line, while others wrote hurried notes back to loved ones, describing only the safe and mundane aspects of their days, sparing details that might provoke fear. These letters were precious threads connecting the isolated, high-stakes world of the airfield with life beyond the conflict. A reminder that the world still existed in forms both ordinary and comforting. Occasionally, a letter would be read aloud in the mess tent, the sender's voice echoing in laughter, sighs, or even tears, briefly lifting the veil of stress and fear that hung over everyone. Amidst these routines, small moments of levity and distraction were cherished. A card game might start on a makeshift table, the shuffled deck a temporary escape from the looming presence of war. Some pilots played catch with a ball near the hangars, laughing as it bounced awkwardly on gravel, while others exchanged stories from home, exaggerating them to spark laughter or admiration. Even simple acts like sharing a slice of chocolate or sneaking a fresh apple from the limited supplies became small but meaningful victories. punctuating the day with fragments of normalcy in an otherwise extraordinary life. As the afternoon wore on, the work of the airfield continued. Supplies were organized, maps updated, and new intelligence briefed quietly to squadron leaders. Pilots performed maintenance checks on their own aircraft, testing controls, inspecting gauges, and ensuring that every mechanism responded perfectly, knowing that each detail mattered in the skies. The sun moved lazily across the sky, casting long shadows from the hangars onto the dusty ground, and the quiet hum of engines being warmed or adjusted formed a background rhythm, almost musical in its repetition. Even during downtime, the mind of a pilot never fully rested. Conversations frequently drifted to speculation about the enemy, recounting details of the morning skirmish, or sharing fears of what might come next. Occasionally, someone would mention a rumor of an impending Luftwaffe raid, and the entire room would tense, only to release the collective breath once reassurances circulated. Yet, in these moments, there was also a profound sense of connection, a recognition that everyone around shared the same risks, the same exhilaration, and the same unspoken understanding of the thin line between life and death. As evening approached, pilots changed into slightly less formal clothing, settling into corners of the mess or leaning against the walls of the hangars, drinking tea, nibbling on whatever food remained, and telling stories of home, of childhood adventures, or of imagined scenarios far removed from the relentless sky. Outside, the wind shifted slightly, carrying with it the smell of damp earth, hinting at the possibility of rain overnight. The airfield, once bustling with morning energy and midday urgency, now seemed to breathe in quiet preparation, anticipating the next sortie, the next call to arms, the next dance with the skies. By the time darkness crept across the fields, pilots were exhausted but alert, minds filled with a mixture of relief, anticipation, and the silent, unspoken bond forged through shared danger. Each day blended seamlessly into the next, a rhythm of flight, maintenance, camaraderie, and reflection, with the sky always waiting above, patient and unyielding, a constant reminder of both peril and purpose in the extraordinary lives of those who dared to soar. As the sun slipped below the horizon, the airfield transformed into a world of muted shadows and soft, flickering lights from lanterns and small windows. The once bustling hangars now echoed with distant footsteps and the occasional metallic clink of tools being put away. Pilots, weary from the relentless rhythm of sorties, maintenance, and briefings, found themselves alone or in small clusters, sitting on crates or leaning against the cold metal fuselage of their planes, eyes tracing the outline of stars beginning to pierce the deepening sky. The cool evening air carried a faint scent of damp earth and lingering smoke from engines, grounding them in the quiet reality of the moment, even as their minds continued to replay the events of the day with uncanny clarity. Some took to writing in diaries, their pens scratching softly across paper as if to release the tension coiled inside. Thoughts spilled onto the page. The fear of the clouds, the adrenaline of dogfights, the sharpness of each near miss, and the faces of comrades who had fought bravely or fallen. Others simply sat, staring at the distant horizon, imagining fields and rivers far below, or recalling memories of home, the smell of baked bread, the laughter of siblings, the familiar voice of a parent. In these quiet reflections, the human element of war became palpable, an invisible thread connecting courage, dread, and longing for normalcy. Some pilots whispered to one another in low tones, recounting minor victories or sharing concerns about the next day. The stories were filled with both humor and tension, a delicate balance that allowed them to process experiences too intense to articulate fully in daylight. A joke about a missed maneuver, a playful tease about someone's flight helmet, or a shared exclamation over a daring move in the clouds acted as emotional release, subtle but crucial for keeping spirits intact. The camaraderie forged in flight extended seamlessly into these quiet hours, a silent support system that eased the weight of constant danger. The night brought with it introspection that was as much about survival as it was about purpose. Thoughts turned inward. Why had you chosen this life? What drove the willingness to climb into the sky knowing the risks? Was it duty, fearlessness, the thrill of flying, or something deeper, unspoken? Pilots often found themselves confronting these questions in solitude, the answers sometimes coming as fleeting realizations, sometimes remaining elusive, like shadows at the edge of consciousness. The act of reflection itself, of simply observing one's own reactions and emotions, became a form of quiet resilience, a preparation for the uncertainties of tomorrow. Some nights, the distant hum of aircraft engines returning from missions could be heard, slicing through the calm like a reminder that the war never truly paused. Mechanics occasionally called out brief instructions to latecomers, or a pilot returned, feet heavy and heart racing, recounting a near miss or a daring maneuver in the fading light. The airfield seemed simultaneously vast and intimate, a stage where the extraordinary unfolded within the ordinary. The glow of a lantern illuminating a map, the muffled laughter of a pilot swapping stories, the faint rustle of a letter being tucked into a pocket. Every detail became heightened in the quiet, each sound, smell, and shadow laden with significance after a day of life and death stakes. As darkness deepened, sleep arrived sporadically, fragmented by dreams that carried the echoes of the sky. Engines, gunfire, clouds, and the faces of comrades. Some dreams were vivid, replaying events from earlier sorties with uncanny realism. Others were abstract, blending memories, fears, and hopes in patterns that seemed almost symbolic, yet undeniably tied to the experience of being airborne and in combat. Pilots often awoke briefly, heart pounding, only to remind themselves of the solidity of the ground beneath, the familiar weight of their gear at rest, and the bonds that connected them to the squadron and to home. The night offered a rare sanctuary, a chance to process, reflect, and rejuvenate before the inevitable pull of the next day. Even as the stars twinkled coldly above, a quiet acceptance settled. The sky would call again, unpredictably and unrelentingly, demanding courage, skill, and resilience. And for the pilots of the Battle of Britain, these nighttime reflections were as vital as any flight. They were moments where fear met understanding, where humanity persisted amid the machinery of war, and where the quiet acknowledgement of vulnerability became a source of strength. The morning arrived with a subdued light, filtering through the hangar windows and brushing against the worn floors, and pilots began trickling in, murmuring about the latest news and whispering rumors they had heard from dispatchers, intelligence officers, or civilians passing through nearby villages. The base was alive not only with engines and maintenance, but with information, fact, and speculation blending into an intricate web that each pilot had to navigate with care. Everyone seemed to carry fragments of stories, tales of daring heroism, miraculous escapes, or entire squadrons lost to the clouds. And while some details sparked awe and admiration, others were met with skepticism, raised eyebrows, and quiet groans at the exaggeration. The official news briefings projected a sense of relentless optimism. Heroic pilots were saving Britain from imminent invasion. Every victory was celebrated, every loss minimized or sanitized. Posters adorned the walls, depicting smiling pilots soaring above clouds, clutching their controls with fearless determination, and beneath them, Phrases like "keep calm and fly on" or "the few who protect the many" echoed the intended message of national morale. Yet pilots, having faced the raw, unfiltered reality of combat, often exchanged knowing glances, half amused, half exasperated at the contrast between the polished narrative and the gritty truth of smoke-filled skies, torn engines, and the haunting image of comrades falling out of formation. In corners of the mess tent, small groups huddled over newspapers and radio updates, dissecting the propaganda with quiet humor and occasional frustration. "Apparently, we all shot down 12 planes each yesterday," one pilot muttered, waving the paper with a grin. Another replied, "If only that were true. I barely managed to scare one away before it disappeared behind the clouds." Laughter rippled through the group, a small release from the tension. Yet beneath it lingered a shared understanding of the delicate balance between morale, truth, and the survival instinct that governed every decision in the sky. Rumors traveled quickly, often more vividly than official reports. Whispers of daring low-altitude chases, enemy pilots performing acrobatics, or miraculous landings spread like wildfire, sometimes inflating ordinary events into legend. Each story became a thread in a tapestry of perception, a way for pilots to contextualize their own experiences and measure themselves against the feats of others. Some pilots clung to these tales for inspiration, a reminder that skill, courage, and a touch of luck could see them through the most harrowing encounters. Others were more cynical, recognizing the exaggeration but appreciating the humor, camaraderie, and sense of shared identity that these stories fostered. Amidst all this, conversations inevitably turned inward, focusing on personal performance, doubts, and strategies. Pilots compared notes on maneuvers, discussed reactions during dogfights, and quietly evaluated the reliability of each member of their squadron. There was an unspoken awareness that no poster, no article, and no rumor could capture the true essence of flying under fire: the adrenaline spikes, the split-second decisions, the intimate knowledge of one's own limits and those of the machine beneath. Yet, the mixture of rumor and propaganda served a purpose, offering small reprieves from fear while reinforcing the importance of unity and courage, even when reality felt harsher than any printed story. Walking across the base to the hangars, you overhear fragments of these discussions, snippets of laughter, quiet arguments, and whispered admiration for feats performed just yesterday in the clouds. The air is filled with a blend of expectation, curiosity, and the ever-present tension of anticipation for the next mission. Even as official statements proclaim grand victories, each pilot knows that truth is more nuanced, composed of adrenaline, skill, mistakes, fear, and fleeting moments of triumph. And yet, in this interplay between rumor and reality, there is a peculiar solace, a recognition that all of them, every pilot, mechanic, and officer, are part of a story larger than themselves, a narrative in which their courage and humanity persist amidst the chaos of the Battle of Britain. By late afternoon, these stories and rumors have settled into the routines of the base, quietly shaping conversations, humor, and morale. Pilots exchange knowing smiles, nods of understanding, and occasional laughter, appreciating the subtle balance between reality and perception, courage and fear, duty and desire for ordinary moments of safety. It is this interplay that, in many ways, sustains them, allowing them to face the skies once more, aware that heroism is often quiet, unseen, and composed of small acts that may never make it into the headlines but are no less vital to the life and spirit of those who defend the skies. The morning air was crisp, carrying with it the subtle scent of damp grass and oil, as pilots assembled once more near the briefing room, the maps laid out in meticulous detail across the long wooden tables. Each map was a tapestry of lines, symbols, and notations, representing both the known and the uncertain, charting the skies they would soon navigate. Officers spoke in measured tones, explaining enemy movements, highlighting potential ambush points, and outlining the formations and maneuvers that would maximize effectiveness while minimizing risk. The precision of the briefing contrasted sharply with the unpredictable reality of combat. Yet it was a ritual of discipline, focus, and shared responsibility that every pilot understood to be crucial. Pilots listened intently, absorbing not just the tactical diagrams, but also the subtle nuances of strategy conveyed in tone, gestures, and choice of words. Instructions emphasized coordination, when to break formation, when to ascend or descend, how to communicate silently through wing movements and radio brevity codes. The officers punctuated the technical details with anecdotes of previous engagements, stories of mistakes and successes, lessons that would only make sense in the crucible of the sky. You noticed the tension beneath the surface. Pilots mentally rehearsing maneuvers, imagining scenarios where split-second decisions could determine survival, their fingers tapping on the edges of tables, hearts pacing in rhythm with the gravity of responsibility. After the briefing, it was time for physical preparation and simulation. Some pilots moved to the airfield's small flight simulators, crude by today's standards but effective in sharpening reflexes, practicing maneuvers, and anticipating enemy tactics. The vibration of the controls, the simulated engine hum, and the careful observation of dials provided a safe, if intense, environment to test skill and judgment. Others engaged in drills on the grass, practicing coordination, signaling, and emergency responses, how to exit the aircraft in a hurry, how to manage a rapid descent, how to stabilize a faltering engine mid-flight. Each exercise, while grounded in theory and routine, carried the weight of real-world consequence, reminding every pilot that even the smallest lapse could have dire results. During these preparations, the discussions among pilots were animated yet focused. They debated the merits of various formations, recalled the unpredictability of enemy tactics, and shared personal insights about handling pressure, managing fear, and trusting instinct. A more experienced pilot might quietly correct a younger one's posture or grip, offering subtle tips about control sensitivity or evasive maneuvers. These moments of mentorship were invaluable, blending technical mastery with psychological resilience, ensuring that every pilot not only understood the mechanics of flight, but also the mindset required to survive and protect comrades in the unforgiving sky. Lunch was a brief interlude, simple rations eaten quickly, often accompanied by murmured conversations about upcoming sorties or observations from previous missions. Despite the brevity, these moments were essential for focus and morale. The taste of bread, cheese, or tinned meat became almost ritualistic, grounding the pilots physically and mentally, a reminder of sustenance and survival in the midst of an unpredictable schedule. Occasionally, someone would share a small treat, a piece of chocolate, a rare fruit, or a letter from home, sparking smiles and short-lived laughter that softened the intensity of preparation. The afternoon was devoted to strategy drills in the air. Pilots climbed into their Spitfires, engines roaring with anticipation, as instructors orchestrated complex scenarios designed to test reaction times, formation integrity, and tactical decision-making. Clouds became obstacles and allies, sun positions were leveraged for advantage, and simulated enemy approaches demanded careful observation and immediate action. The rhythm of climbing, banking, diving, and returning to formation exercised both body and mind, forging muscle memory and sharpening instinctive responses that could save lives. Every maneuver was dissected afterward. What worked, what failed, how timing could be improved, how communication could prevent disaster. By the time the day waned into evening, pilots returned to the base with a mixture of exhaustion, satisfaction, and quiet anticipation. The combination of strategic preparation, physical rigor, and mental rehearsal left them more confident, yet acutely aware of the unpredictability that still awaited. Walking across the airfield, engines cooling behind them, the faint smell of burnt fuel mingling with evening dew, they carried with them the lessons of discipline, trust, and shared purpose, ready to face whatever the skies would demand next. The sun had long disappeared beyond the horizon, leaving the airfield cloaked in darkness, punctuated only by dim lanterns and the faint glow of cabin lights inside the hangars. The night brought a different kind of tension, one not eased by daylight's clarity, where shadows seemed thicker, every sound amplified, and the distant hum of engines both inviting and menacing. Pilots assembled quietly, their faces half hidden by helmets and goggles, voices low as they went over maps illuminated by lanterns, tracing routes through the darkened sky with fingers that trembled slightly despite careful training. The briefing emphasized stealth, awareness, and the importance of every second, for the night was an entirely different battlefield, where visibility was minimal and mistakes could be catastrophic. Climbing into the Spitfires felt surreal. The familiar rumble of engines was muted by the cool night air, and as the planes taxied along the dimly lit runways, shadows danced across fuselages and hangar walls. The glow of the instruments inside the cockpit seemed almost blinding against the blackness outside. Each dial, each gauge a critical source of information. The pilots adjusted oxygen masks and toggled controls with meticulous precision, conscious that the margin for error was far smaller than during daylight sorties. The first ascent was silent but intense, engines whispering under the strain of lift, wings cutting through clouds that loomed like dark mountains, obscuring vision and amplifying the sense of isolation high above the countryside. Once airborne, the tension heightened. The world below was a patchwork of inky shadows, rivers like black ribbons, fields and forests melting into indistinct forms, dotted only by the occasional flicker of distant village lights or searchlights sweeping the sky. Every sound, engine hum, radio crackle, or distant explosion, carried immense weight, the pilot's senses heightened to a razor's edge. The first sighting of enemy aircraft was a flicker of metal glinting in the moonlight, a shadow slipping through clouds, and a surge of adrenaline cut through the cool night air. Decisions had to be instantaneous. Climb, dive, bank, evade. The darkness magnified fear, but training and instinct became the only guides through the abyss. Gunfire in the night was eerie and disorienting. Tracers traced pale, glowing arcs across the black sky, illuminating glimpses of aircraft like spectral birds in motion. The sound was both near and distant, echoing oddly through the clouds, challenging perception, and making it difficult to judge distance or trajectory. Pilots communicated with clipped radio phrases, subtle wing movements, or eye contact when possible, relying on the unspoken language built from hours of daylight practice now applied in almost total darkness. The pace was frantic yet methodical, every decision a delicate balance between aggression and caution, between survival and the imperative to engage the enemy. Amid the tension, the night air carried a strange beauty. Moonlight glimmered on polished metal, clouds shifted in haunting patterns, and the silhouette of a Spitfire cutting through the darkness created an almost poetic image of grace amidst chaos. Pilots caught fleeting glimpses of one another, a nod of recognition, a subtle maneuver indicating support or warning. The camaraderie and trust forged in daylight sorties became even more essential here, where mistakes were magnified and visibility limited, and where survival depended as much on coordination as on courage and skill. Returning to the airfield after the raid was surreal. The once familiar terrain appeared alien in the night, shadows masking the edges of runways, hangars looming larger and darker than in the sunlit hours. The engines of returning aircraft whispered in exhaustion, the pilot's hands trembling slightly from the tension and concentration demanded by the nocturnal engagement. Mechanics hurried to check for damage, fuel leaks, or misfires, their own faces illuminated by lanterns and the occasional spark of welding or repair tools. The mess tent was quiet, the usual hum of conversation subdued as pilots nursed mugs of lukewarm tea or soup, words few, eyes distant, minds replaying every maneuver, every near miss, every fleeting moment of terror and triumph. Night raids were unpredictable, unforgiving, and exhausting, yet they became an inescapable part of life in the Battle of Britain. The darkness concealed threats, amplified fear, and tested every skill, but it also revealed resilience, sharpened instincts, and strengthened the bonds between those who shared the sky. As pilots settled into the uneasy comfort of blankets or chairs, the distant rumble of engines and the memory of the glowing tracers lingered in their minds, a vivid reminder that even in darkness, courage and determination could illuminate the way. The morning light filtered weakly through the clouds, casting a grayish glow over the airfield, and yet, despite the exhaustion from night raids and the ever-present tension in the air, small bursts of laughter began to ripple through the squadron. Pilots leaned against planes, swapping stories about improbable escapes, near misses, and mistakes that, in hindsight, seemed absurdly trivial, but had elicited pounding hearts just hours earlier. Humor, often dark and self-deprecating, became a coping mechanism, a way to reconcile fear with the need to function effectively in the relentless routine of aerial combat. One pilot recounted how, during a dive, he had accidentally trailed smoke from a faulty engine, looking like an amateur magician performing a disappearing act. Others chimed in, joking about someone mistaking a flock of birds for enemy aircraft, sending the squadron into a brief, frantic chase. Laughter echoed across the hangars and open spaces, mingling with the smell of fuel, damp earth, and the metallic tang of freshly serviced aircraft. These stories, while amusing, served a deeper purpose. They reinforced camaraderie, reminding everyone that they were part of a collective experience, bound by shared peril and a shared sense of absurdity in the face of danger. Meals became another stage for levity. The mess tent, once subdued during briefings or tense discussions, transformed into a lively space where pilots exchanged jokes, teased one another, or mimicked the voices and gestures of officers during morning briefings. Even the simplest rations, bread, cheese, tinned meat, and tea, were accompanied by stories that stretched reality, exaggerated feats of flight, or fabricated accounts of heroic antics. The humor was subtle but vital, a delicate thread weaving together morale, mental resilience, and social cohesion. Outside the tent, playful competitions emerged among pilots. Who could complete pre-flight checks fastest? Who could taxi a plane in a straight line without veering? Even tossing a small ball or juggling a tool became an opportunity for laughter, skill demonstration, and bonding. These moments, while seemingly trivial, reminded everyone that life extended beyond the cockpit, and that joy, however fleeting, was essential to sustaining courage and focus. The interpersonal dynamics were nuanced. Younger pilots observed the habits and quirks of veterans, absorbing lessons in both skill and attitude. Experienced flyers, in turn, guided, teased, and sometimes protected their juniors, cultivating an environment where mentorship intertwined with levity. Inside jokes, nicknames, and shared rituals formed invisible threads connecting every member of the squadron, allowing them to endure the rigors of aerial combat with a sense of belonging and mutual support. Even during maintenance or inspections, humor persisted. Mechanics and pilots would mockingly critique each other's cleaning techniques, exaggerate tales of in-flight blunders, or stage playful competitions to see who could identify minor faults first. The airfield, often a scene of precise, urgent activity, occasionally erupted into laughter, a sound that both relieved tension and reinforced bonds in ways that words alone could not. Yet, beneath the laughter, a profound sense of solidarity endured. Pilots recognized that the joking, teasing, and playful banter were not distractions from the reality of danger, but rather a means to process it, to remind themselves of their humanity, and to support one another through the psychological and physical demands of constant vigilance. Humor became a survival tool as crucial as skill with a joystick or knowledge of enemy tactics, for it allowed the squadron to endure, to keep flying, and to maintain the emotional equilibrium necessary for the next sortie. As the day waned, and planes returned from training or reconnaissance flights, the airfield retained this delicate balance between tension and camaraderie. Pilots lounged on crates, shared small treats, and whispered jokes about events too absurd to recount officially. The bonds formed in these moments, built on laughter, shared fear, and collective experience, became as vital to their survival as any strategy discussed in briefings or maneuvers practiced in the skies. Amidst the clouds, gunfire, and constant uncertainty, these human connections provided grounding, reminding every pilot that even in war, there was room for laughter, friendship, and the quiet reaffirmation of life itself. The morning sun had barely touched the horizon when the alarm bells echoed across the airfield, jolting the squadron from the relative calm of routine into immediate readiness. Engines roared to life, wings gleamed with dew and fuel, and pilots climbed into their Spitfires with practiced urgency, hearts hammering as the reality of impending combat pressed down with a tangible weight. Today's mission promised low clouds, erratic wind currents, and reports of an incoming Luftwaffe formation that no one could yet quantify in number or intent. Even the most experienced flyers felt a flicker of apprehension, a reminder that the skies were as unpredictable as the human mind under pressure. Climbing through the thickening clouds, visibility shrank to mere meters, each turn and dive fraught with risk. The fog itself became an adversary, hiding friend from foe, masking altitude changes, and forcing split-second decisions where hesitation could mean disaster. Pilots relied on instinct, training, and the faint glimmer of wingtip lights or contrails to navigate the labyrinth above the patchwork fields below. The distant roar of enemy engines grew louder, a low, menacing drone that seemed to vibrate in the bones, as the first silhouettes of Messerschmitts appeared through the swirling mist. Heartbeats quickened, fear and focus intertwined, sharpening every sense to a fine point. The battle unfolded in a chaotic ballet. Tracers arced through gray skies, engines screamed in desperate climbs and dives, and clouds obscured the paths of both pursuer and pursued. Pilots experienced moments of disorientation, mistaking shadows for threats, or inadvertently veering too close to a comrade in the haze. One pilot swerved sharply to avoid what he thought was an enemy formation, only to nearly collide with a fellow squadron member, the narrow escape leaving both breathless and momentarily speechless. Errors, both minor and critical, were magnified under these conditions, and every decision was a negotiation with uncertainty itself. Amid the turbulence and confusion, split-second heroism emerged. Pilots shielded one another from surprise attacks, executed unexpected maneuvers to draw fire away from vulnerable teammates, and communicated through a mixture of hand signals, brief radio calls, and instinctive wing coordination. The camaraderie forged in quieter hours became the lifeline in this storm of motion, smoke, and sound. Yet, even amidst teamwork, solitude persisted, each pilot alone in the cockpit, alone with the machine and the sky, fully aware that survival was as much an internal struggle as a tactical one. Small details punctuated the chaos. The glint of sunlight on a spinning propeller, the muffled roar of engines cut by bursts of gunfire, the sudden flash of tracer rounds illuminating the gray cloudscape. Fear surged unpredictably, a pulse of icy adrenaline that could sharpen reflexes or cloud judgment, depending on the moment. Moments of eerie calm punctuated the frenzied combat. Cloud pockets where the roar of engines dulled, where the only sound was the rhythmic beating of one's own heart and the faint whine of the plane slicing through mist. These brief lulls were deceptive, offering little respite and demanding constant vigilance. By mid-afternoon, the fog began to lift slightly, revealing the scattered aftermath of the skirmish. Trails of smoke, planes limping back to base, and distant flashes where shells had found their mark. Pilots, though exhausted and trembling from the mental strain, felt a mixture of relief and quiet pride. The battle had been won, or at least survived, but the fog of battle left lingering uncertainty. Who had been hit, who had escaped unseen, which reports would be accurate, and which victories were exaggerated or misremembered in the heat of chaos. Returning to the airfield, the mechanics and fellow pilots provided quick assistance, checking engines, stabilizing wings, and offering reassuring words. But the mental imprint of the day's events remained etched deeply. Even after landing, the fog of battle persisted internally. Pilots replayed every maneuver, every near miss, every instant where instinct had prevailed or faltered. The line between courage and recklessness, success and error, became blurred, leaving a mixture of triumph, guilt, and reflection. It was in these moments, the quiet debrief, the checking of damage, the shared stories over lukewarm tea, that the human aspect of war crystallized. The fragile balance between skill, fortune, and the emotional resilience necessary to navigate both the skies and the mind under unrelenting pressure. The evening air carried a faint chill, a reminder that summer was fading and the nights would soon grow longer. And as the pilots returned from sorties, a small ritual awaited them that offered comfort amidst the chaos. The arrival of letters from home. Each envelope, worn at the edges from travel, represented a tangible connection to lives beyond the airfield, beyond the constant hum of engines and the distant threat of enemy aircraft. For some, these letters were eagerly anticipated, clutching them as if they contained a fragment of the world they had left behind. For others, they were approached with quiet caution, knowing that the news inside could bring joy or anxiety in equal measure. Inside the mess tent or under the soft glow of lanterns, pilots carefully opened each envelope, savoring the paper's texture, the familiar handwriting, the unique scent of ink mingled with memories. Some read aloud to small groups, sharing stories of family gatherings, hometown gossip, or the mundane yet treasured details of daily life. A neighbor's cat giving birth, a sibling learning to ride a bicycle, or a parent's simple advice about tending to a garden. These narratives, ordinary in their own worlds, became extraordinary to the pilots, a soothing counterpoint to the extraordinary intensity of aerial combat. The letters often sparked reflection. One pilot paused, rereading a line about a mother worrying over her son's health, and the memory of his own childhood surfaced. The scent of freshly baked bread, the creak of a wooden floorboard, the warmth of a familiar embrace. Another smiled faintly at a sibling's joke about a school prank, the levity providing a brief reprieve from the mental weight of planning and executing sorties. The act of writing back became an equally important ritual, carefully choosing words that conveyed reassurance without fear, hope without exaggeration, maintaining a delicate balance between truth and emotional support. Amid the sharing of letters, conversations naturally drifted toward home traditions, meals, and celebrations long past or imagined in the future. Pilots compared notes on recipes, local festivals, and peculiar family customs, weaving memories into dialogue that was both humorous and poignant. The mental imagery of home, vivid, comforting, and entirely separate from the airfield, provided emotional anchoring, a temporary escape from the immediacy of survival and strategy. Even the simplest recollections, like the taste of a particular pie or the sound of a familiar street, offered moments of grounding, reminding pilots that life continued beyond the clouds, engines, and smoke. These letters also became a lens through which pilots evaluated their own endurance. Some felt guilt for leaving loved ones behind, anxiety over the uncertainty of return, and a profound longing for ordinary moments that now seemed distant and almost unattainable. Yet, intertwined with these sentiments was resilience, the recognition that these connections, though physically separated, provided motivation, purpose, and the quiet reassurance that their lives had meaning beyond the mission. Pilots read and reread phrases, memorized sentences, and tucked envelopes safely into pockets or helmet compartments, small talismans against fear and loneliness. Occasionally, letters would contain news of friends from home, snippets of local events, or even rumors that, while sometimes trivial, became points of discussion and amusement among the squadron. The human connection persisted through words, bridging the gap between life at the airfield and the world outside, reinforcing the notion that the pilot's courage and daily efforts were appreciated, observed, and remembered by those waiting in distant towns and villages. By nightfall, with letters read and replies composed, pilots often lingered quietly, gazing at the darkening sky, imagining their families tucked into beds, perhaps sharing the same stars. The contrast between the normalcy of life at home and the relentless demands of aerial combat deepened their appreciation for both worlds. And while sleep eventually claimed them, the words of loved ones remained, echoing softly in the mind, a comforting presence amidst uncertainty, danger, and the ongoing struggle of each day. The afternoon sky was a shifting canvas of clouds and sunlight, perfect in appearance but treacherous in reality, as pilots climbed into their Spitfires for another sortie, knowing that danger lurked in every direction. Today, the Luftwaffe had been reported near the coastline, and the briefing emphasized vigilance, formation integrity, and readiness for sudden engagement. As the engines roared to life and the planes lifted into the open sky, the familiar thrill of ascent mingled with a gnawing tension. Every pilot was acutely aware that the next few minutes could determine life or death. Within moments of entering enemy airspace, the first alarm sounded. A flurry of tracers arced across the cloud-streaked sky, and the chaotic hum of multiple aircraft filled the ears, blending with the whine of engines and the distant echo of explosions. One pilot, attempting a sharp climb to evade an approaching Messerschmitt, felt a jolt as bullets riddled the fuselage, narrowly missing vital components. The plane shuddered violently, a metallic groan resonating through the cockpit, and for a heartbeat, time seemed suspended, every decision compressed into an instant of pure instinct. Close calls multiplied rapidly. Another pilot, diving to gain speed and positioning, misjudged the proximity of a wingman, forcing a sudden bank that sent adrenaline coursing through veins. Tracers zipped past like fleeting streaks of fire, while clouds provided both cover and concealment, a deceptive dance that could either save or doom a flyer. Heartbeats accelerated, breathing became shallow, and the mind worked with a singular focus. Keep the plane steady, avoid collisions, anticipate enemy moves, and survive. Each maneuver was a high-stakes gamble, a test of reflexes honed through hours of practice and the intuition born from experience. Amid the chaos, moments of surreal calm appeared, fleeting yet intense. A sudden gap in the clouds revealed a patch of sunlight illuminating a spinning aircraft, a tracer line cutting across the golden glow, a scene both beautiful and terrifying. Pilots experienced a strange detachment, as if observing themselves from outside, aware of the peril but momentarily suspended in the strange poetry of battle. The mind oscillated between hyper-alertness and fleeting awe, a cognitive balancing act that could make the difference between survival and disaster. Communication was vital yet fraught. Radio calls were clipped, punctuated by static, and often drowned in the roar of engines and distant gunfire. Wingmen signaled with slight movements or brief visual cues, a silent language forged in countless hours of training. Trust became literal. The wrong assumption, a misread signal, or a moment's hesitation could end in catastrophe. Each narrow escape, dodging bullets, evading collisions, or pulling out of a steep dive just in time, was internalized, etched into memory, and shared with quiet nods or brief exclamations after regrouping. Returning to the airfield was both relief and reflection. Engines cooling, planes limping slightly from damage, pilots felt the lingering adrenaline as they dismounted and walked among hangars, mechanics hurrying to check for bullet holes, fuel leaks, or torn panels. Conversations were sparse, often punctuated by shared glances that conveyed understanding without words. Everyone carried the invisible tally of close calls, each a reminder of mortality, skill, and the unpredictable nature of the skies. Yet, amid the fear and tension, there was a profound sense of accomplishment. Survival depended not only on training and reflexes, but on courage, instinct, and the quiet confidence in one another. Each narrow escape became a lesson, a story to recount in quiet moments, and a testament to resilience. Pilots knew that danger was ever present, yet they also understood the fragile beauty of life preserved through skill, intuition, and sometimes sheer luck. These experiences, seared into memory, shaped the psyche of every flyer, fostering both caution and a deep respect for the unpredictable forces of war and sky alike. High above the patchwork countryside, the sky transformed into a vast, living panorama, a spectacle that few on the ground could fully appreciate, yet pilots experienced in fleeting, almost sacred moments. Clouds shifted and morphed with a slow, deliberate grace, catching sunlight and painting the horizon with shades of gold, rose, and deep indigo. The sight was so arresting that even in the midst of duty, some pilots allowed themselves a brief pause, banking gently to admire the subtle interplay of light and shadow. These moments were fleeting, precious fragments of serenity that contrasted sharply with the ever-present danger of enemy aircraft and the roar of engines. Rainbow arcs appeared briefly after a passing rain shower, refracted across vapor trails and catching the glint of spinning propellers. Pilots glanced at one another through cockpits, a shared silent acknowledgement of the beauty above, almost a private celebration amid the rigor of war. Occasionally, a lone bird would glide across the open sky, its effortless movement a startling reminder of freedom and life beyond conflict. For a split second, the mechanics of survival faded into the background, replaced by awe, reflection, and an acute sense of connection to something larger than oneself. Sunsets, in particular, offered moments of quiet wonder. As the sun dipped behind the horizon, clouds ignited in fiery hues of crimson and orange, the colors stretching across endless expanses. Pilots noted the dramatic silhouettes of distant aircraft, the interplay of shadow and light lending an almost theatrical dimension to the battlefield. In these moments, fear and adrenaline were tempered by recognition of the sublime. Even amidst chaos, there existed beauty, a reminder of life's complexity and its capacity to inspire awe. Weather phenomena became another source of fascination. Sudden lightning storms illuminated entire cloud formations, stark white flashes revealing the contours of the sky in stark relief. Pilots maneuvered cautiously, aware of the danger, yet unable to fully suppress the thrill and wonder of the spectacle. Hailstones pattered against canopies like tiny percussion instruments, winds sculpted clouds into surreal shapes, and the faint scent of ozone often followed the storm, adding a sensory depth that made the moment unforgettable. These natural events, while sometimes threatening, became a paradoxical source of mental respite and reflective thought, reminding flyers that the skies they navigated were alive, unpredictable, and magnificent. Even mundane details, the glint of sunlight on a wingtip, the shimmer of frost at higher altitudes, or the serene shadow of a passing cloud on the landscape below, captured attention, if only for an instant. Pilots would sometimes remark on these observations during debriefs, sharing impressions of light, color, or unexpected natural beauty. In these discussions, the tension of duty intertwined with genuine wonder, reinforcing the duality of their existence. One foot grounded in the practical realities of war, the other lifted by awe and reverence for the natural world unfolding above and around them. These moments of awe carried emotional weight. They reminded pilots of the world they were defending, of the life that continued below, and of the fragile beauty that made every mission, every risk, and every close call profoundly meaningful. Though transient, these experiences etched themselves deeply into memory, a source of resilience, inspiration, and, at times, quiet solace amidst the relentless intensity of the Battle of Britain. Even after landing and performing post-flight checks, the lingering images of sky and light would stay in their minds, a quiet, sustaining presence in the midst of uncertainty and danger. Life at the airfield was a constant whirl of preparation, sorties, and maintenance. Yet within this routine, relationships formed in surprising and enduring ways. Pilots came from towns and cities scattered across the United Kingdom, and a few had even arrived from distant corners of the Commonwealth, bringing with them accents, customs, and experiences vastly different from their fellow flyers. At first, these differences seemed to create subtle barriers, hesitations in conversation, uncertainty about humor, or unfamiliarity with local slang. But necessity and shared danger quickly dissolved any distance. In the hangars, over mugs of tepid tea or during long waits for briefings, friendships emerged in unexpected combinations. A young pilot from a quiet English village bonded with an older Australian flyer, whose anecdotes of life in the outback seemed impossibly distant yet fascinating. They laughed together over differences in slang, shared food, and even competed in small bets over aerial tactics and aircraft handling. each interaction strengthening trust and easing the invisible tension that hovered over every mission. These bonds were forged in the crucible of both fear and camaraderie, creating a network of support that was vital for mental resilience. Letters and stories played a crucial role in these connections. Pilots would read aloud passages from letters received from home, prompting empathy, curiosity, or shared laughter. Tales of life back in civilian towns, family dramas, and peculiar local customs created a rich tapestry of cultural exchange, turning brief breaks between sorties into moments of learning and entertainment. Humor, once again, served as a glue, bridging backgrounds and easing the mental weight of constant readiness. A sarcastic remark, a shared joke, or a playful mimicry of an officer's gestures became a common language transcending nationality, age, and experience. Shared experiences in flight reinforced these unexpected friendships. Facing the same enemy, navigating the same clouds, and experiencing near misses together fostered unspoken bonds. Pilots instinctively watched for each other in the air, communicated through subtle signals, and offered protective maneuvers when a comrade was in danger. Trust in these moments was absolute and immediate, yet it also extended beyond the cockpit, nurturing loyalty, understanding, and a profound sense of interconnectedness. A laugh shared over breakfast could be as significant as a life-saving maneuver performed at 20,000 feet. Even differences in personality became sources of strength. The calm, methodical pilot complemented the daring, impulsive flyer. The reserved individual learned from the gregarious storyteller. The youngest, most inexperienced pilot drew courage from veterans whose reputation and skill inspired confidence. Each pilot brought unique perspectives and qualities, creating an interwoven community where diversity became an asset rather than a hindrance. Bonds often grew through small gestures, sharing a rare chocolate bar, offering advice about handling aircraft quirks, or even a quiet nod acknowledging a moment of bravery or clever improvisation. Beyond the base, these friendships often extended to shared downtime. Walks along nearby hedgerows, impromptu games in open fields, or quiet evenings spent observing the sky together became treasured rituals. Pilots exchanged confidences, fears, and hopes, learning about one another's families, ambitions, and private worlds beyond the cockpit. These human connections, unexpected and organic, were a source of grounding, emotional resilience, and even joy, reminding each pilot that amidst the danger, life, laughter, and companionship persisted. By the time night fell and lamps glowed faintly across the base, these friendships had become a lifeline. They were more than convenience or social interaction. They were a bulwark against fear, a source of strength, and a reminder that even in the harshest conditions, human connection endured. And as pilots climbed into bedrolls or chairs for rest, the quiet knowledge that someone else was looking out for them, both in the air and on the ground, provided a reassurance deeper than any briefing or tactical preparation could offer. The sky above the English coastline was a living, breathing battlefield, unpredictable and constantly shifting, demanding not just courage but ingenuity from every pilot. Repetition alone was no longer sufficient. The Luftwaffe adapted, tactics evolved, and pilots learned that survival depended on their ability to think creatively, anticipate enemy moves, and improvise under pressure. From the briefing room to the cockpit, discussion centered not only on what had worked previously but on what could be done differently, better, and faster, pushing every flyer to consider angles and maneuvers that had not yet been tested in the crucible of combat. Some of the most critical innovations occurred in the simplest moments. Pilots experimented with formation shapes, spacing, and altitude changes to maximize protection while maintaining offensive capability. Small variations in approach angles, dive timing, and evasive turns became essential knowledge, often shared in hushed tones over tea or sketched on small maps in the hangars. Techniques that initially seemed counterintuitive, splitting formations briefly, approaching the sun to blind opponents, or using clouds as deceptive cover, proved invaluable, altering the outcome of skirmishes and saving lives in moments of high tension. These tactical experiments were not without risk. Pilots had to weigh potential benefits against immediate danger, sometimes attempting maneuvers that flirted with catastrophe. A slight miscalculation in speed or angle could result in collision, structural stress, or exposure to enemy fire. Yet, the pursuit of innovation demanded boldness, and many a pilot learned to trust intuition, experience, and the subtle cues from fellow flyers. Each success, however small, reinforced confidence, while failures, though sometimes costly, provided lessons meticulously analyzed for future missions. The sharing of ideas became a cornerstone of squadron life. Briefings and debriefings, once perfunctory, transformed into collaborative problem-solving sessions. Experienced pilots guided younger ones through the nuances of timing, positioning, and energy management, often demonstrating techniques in controlled exercises or mock duels. These interactions were rich with observation, humor, and practical advice, bridging theory and real-world application. It was here that tactical innovation intertwined with camaraderie, each pilot contributing a perspective shaped by personal experience and style. Unexpected challenges spurred the most creative solutions. Sudden weather changes, mechanical quirks, or the unpredictable behavior of enemy aircraft forced pilots to improvise mid-flight, adapting strategies on the fly. One pilot recalled a steep climb that was countered by a rapid cloud descent, using the fog to obscure the maneuver and escape a pursuing Messerschmitt, a risky choice that became a celebrated technique among the squadron. Similarly, improvisation in response to engine malfunctions, gun jams, or fuel constraints highlighted the constant interplay between resourcefulness and instinctive decision-making. Beyond the technical and tactical, innovation included psychological strategy. Pilots learned to read enemy behavior, predict reactions, and exploit hesitation. Feints, simulated retreats, and deliberate maneuvers to lure adversaries into traps became part of the evolving repertoire. These techniques required not only precision but an acute understanding of human behavior under stress, a mental game as critical as mechanical mastery or physical dexterity. By integrating these innovations, the squadron evolved into a more cohesive, adaptable force. Every sortie was an opportunity to test, refine, and perfect strategies, with successes celebrated quietly among pilots and mistakes carefully analyzed for lessons. This culture of tactical ingenuity transformed the squadron from a collection of skilled individuals into a coordinated unit capable of responding fluidly to the unpredictable challenges of aerial warfare, combining courage, intellect, and creativity in the endless ballet of survival above the English skies.